Hello again, YouTube. I'm making yet another video. This one is going to be a little bit more on the depressive side of things. It's going to tie into the last video that I did, and then one even a couple back now, going over Mary Spender, her video on like mental health and how it's a pervasive problem in the music industry. Um, and if the title hasn't already tipped it off, it's basically about when you're past your prime as a musician. Now, I'll kind of get into some detail as to kind of what that can mean and the different variations of it. But first, as always, I kind of like to lead with what kind of prompted this whole thinking. So, I have been teaching a band camp at a school that I work at this past week. And during one of the days, I was talking with another instructor, and we were watching live performances, and they ended up pulling up this one band. And I'm gonna preface, I'm not really much of a fan of this band. I was when I was younger, but as I grew older, my taste kind of changed and things like that. But I was watching their performance. It didn't have the same level of sincerity. The music didn't seem authentic, and it is rapidly showing that certain genres of music fade out a little bit quicker than others. Um, and the instructor, my coworker didn't really agree with me on that, and I'm like, that's totally cool. Like we all got our own opinions on everything, but it kind of make me think of the last two videos, or the last video I did, and then the video about Mary Spender's analysis on kind of like the pervasive issue with mental health in the music industry. And I had said in my last video about people wearing too many hats, how it can burn you out, and I kind of maybe alluded a little bit about how perhaps a certain artist that I had been talking about may have kind of been past their prime, because I talked about how it's pretty infeasible for them to kind of be successful as a musician today now, because of how late in the game that they've been doing stuff and not getting anywhere. So I felt, since it was on my mind, it'd be a good way to kind of talk about it. And now that we've got a little bit of a background, what is your prime, right? It's not necessarily like a sport where it's your most physical, capable self possible. We can always progress as musicians. We can always keep learning and gain new insight. And there are many musicians out there who have been injured or have lost fingers, hands, things like that, and they've still been able to play their instrument. One could argue they're not ever going to be in their prime again because they have a literal handicap, but at the same time, if they're still able to perform, what really is a prime? Is it really just their most capable self, or is it more of what they can actually deliver regardless of the circumstance and hurdles? I think in that context, it's pretty easy to summarize what someone's prime is, but music transcends more than just the physical, right? We'll look at our vocalists. There's a point where, as you get older, you are not going to be able to hit some of the vocal lines that you used to. Even great vocal deliveries like Paul McCartney, even through his Beatle era, he had said when they were recording "Oh Darling" on Abbey Road, their last album, that if this had been a couple of years ago, he'd be able to hit that shit no problem. Even in less than a 10-year span, he was losing his capability. And, one could argue in many different ways why that is. Maybe they didn't take care of their vocals the way they could, or, maybe just from constant touring shows back to back, constant recordings, they never gave themselves proper time to rest. But it just goes to show, even top notch, high quality musicians that we revere and iconicize still fall susceptible to this. So I kind of want to cover a couple of different topics, or I'm sorry, I want to cover a couple of different variations of what a prime is, utilizing my own personal experiences, experiences of those around me, and then kind of wrap it up and just kind of bring to light the whole reason why I'm doing this video of like what happens when you're past your prime. What do you do? How do you go on? So we'll start with me as an example, right? So musically speaking, I passed my prime in about 2017. That's what I would say. I was probably at my most musically competent because I still regularly practiced. I still had a fleeting thought that maybe my music career could happen. It just may be a little bit longer or later than I had originally intended. And I was basically finishing up doing my session work. I wasn't really doing it as much anymore. I joined the Navy in 2015. Even though I was still playing music in 2016, 2017, I got injured and I was in the process of getting out. So I was in the reserves in that time and I had more time to basically kind of just do stuff. And I was like, oh, well, let's get back into music and things like that. But at the end of 2017, I had basically stopped doing any session work. And then, with the pandemic that hit, everything like that, I basically put a lot of my musicianship just onto the back burner and didn't really care much anymore. Um, but that's strictly in a how skilled I had ever been in my life. And I'm going to round that on all my instruments, not just guitar, but bass, drums, harmonica, singing, even my so-called keyboard skills. But if we want to look at my musical career, my peak was in 2013. So in 2011, I started performing under my blues trio, and 2012 things started really taking off with us. And going into 2013, the band had imploded. We had lost our record label. Our album wasn't selling that well, and the talent agency we were with, we ended up getting blacklisted from. So that right there could have been an easy indicator that, like, oh, okay, musically on a career side of things, like, yes, that was my prime. Like, I was actively in a competition with other musicians around me in my area to be successful, but it didn't end up working. So one could argue that any of my music that I had made, any gigs, anything I'd done after that, was past my prime. And I would say you definitely have some basis for that. I mean, I actually see it that way myself. So um, there's already two different ways that we can kind of categorize what your prime is, right? And then we kind of continue onwards where we're more talking about like the actual physicality of being older. Age catches up to everybody. There are phenomenal musicians who are still touring. For example, I don't like the Rolling Stones, not really ever enjoyed any of their music, but the fact that they can still put on a relatively good show at 80 plus years old, that's impressive. And granted, I would say probably for the last 10 years or so, most of the fans who are going there to see them are maybe not fans in the sense of, oh, we love and support you. It could just be, and I'm a cynical person, so that's why I think this. They may just want to be a part of history when, Mick Jagger finally keels over of a heart attack, or Keith Richards, finally like dies of cocaine overdose or something like that. I really hope that's not the case. I hope there are people who actually still think that they give a good enough show that they want to pay money to go and see them. That would be great. But you kind of have to think, right? There are some musicians who have the capacity to soldier on, carry on, and keep doing things and make a relatively decent performance. And then there are musicians who are not. And that, to me, is another category of your prime, because we're talking about the physicality of how good you are as a musician, where your music career ended up going, and also just your age. And to kind of tack more on the age, going back to the whole thing that kind of started this, I was listening to this metal band, watching them play their live performance, and I just feel that the older you get, the harder it is to really perform to the degree of, like, a metal show. Like, we always expect something bombastic. The music's fast, it's hard, it's heavy. You're really trying to get that audience participation going. And I just got to find it a little bit laughable when I see these people who are just extremely old. Oh, okay, I take it back. Maybe not extremely old, but old enough where it's like, all right, man, like, you got to know that you're running against time now, and not just because you're older. It's because of the music genre that you're doing. It's because of the technical skill required to play that kind of music, and because you're old. It's a three-pronged attack that's happening. So, with all that being said, what if you are past your prime? You know, this is an honest assessment I think a lot of musicians need to ask themselves, and I think it's continuous evaluation, right? Because, like I said, there are two different points now. And I haven't even gotten to the third point, but there are two different points throughout my own definitions that I've described here that I've reached my prime: 2013 and 2017. 2013 with my musical career, 2017 with my musical skills. I'm still relatively young. Do not let the balding hairline fool you. I'm actually only 31. So, if we're talking on a age scale, how much longer do I really have, to give a quality performance? I am an injured veteran, so that's a factor, but I'm not. disabled in a traditional way. I can still go to work, I can still function, I can still do all those things. So it's not like I have handicaps or disabilities that prevent me from performing. It's literally just, how much longer can I go because of the genres of music that I choose to play. So I frequently say that my most successful project was a blues trio. I don't necessarily play blues anymore. I haven't played blues since probably I wrote my second album, so maybe about 2015. What I would categorize my music now as is kind of really past genres. Like I still qualify it as modern blues because it takes a lot of modern influences on top of taking a lot of influences from genres that came after blues. But at the same time, I have songs that are, very country. I have songs that are very like 90s boy band. I have songs that are, ska punk. Like all of those do not necessarily fit under blues or even my personal description of modern blues. So I don't really like using the genre descriptor, but you have to because that's just how the music industry works, right? Some of my songs I can still perform with the same level of sincerity and authenticity that I did when I first wrote them. One example would be one of the ones that I performed in the song, Gots to Get While the Getting's Good. That one, I mean, anytime I think about it, I can literally always remember the day that we had our band practice and I went home and was feeling so good that I was like, fuck it. Like, I want to capture this experience. And I wrote it. I can always remember that. I can always channel that, and I can always love that. And I think when you have a music genre that is so baseline, of a world understanding, and I know it's like kind of doesn't really make a lot of sense because, there's so many different genres out there, and there's so many people who relate to so many different things. But when you have an experience that is just so captured well by the song, the compositional skills, the writing skills, and your delivery. It doesn't matter what age you are, it doesn't matter what hurdles you have. You can always kind of channel that and do it. Because music is kind of like storing your memories in a filing cabinet, right? Our instrument and our voice is our filing cabinet, and we can pull out that specific little memory, that song, anytime that we need to, and we can, do what music does. It helps us heal. It boosts our confidence. It makes us feel better on a sad day. Whatever the emotion that you need, you can find in a song. And when it comes to an album, 9 out of 10 times you'll always be able to have that. But now we kind of go towards when you're playing live. And I just don't think a lot of musicians kind of realize when you're past your prime how the odds are so stacked against you that it's something to evaluate. Do I think a lot of musicians need to stop performing? No. I'll get that out of the way, and I probably should have said that right off the bat. But I do think many musicians can benefit from thinking about this realistically and changing and adapting how they're going to perform from then on. And it comes from all 3 points. Are you getting up there in age? Are you not able to play as much as you were able to before? And where's your music career really at? So, utilizing all this and continuing to use myself as an example, the very first song I ever wrote isn't that good of a song in comparison to a lot of other songs that I have. But it's still a song that I like to play from time to time because it really showcases that there was potential. Even early on, there was potential with my songwriting and with my compositional skills. The older that I get though, because I mean one of the first lines was I never tried in school, I ditched class left and right. Some of the time I would play COD 4, but the other times when I was feeling blue, I went and played guitar. And like just talk singing them out, it's like, yeah, they're not great, blah blah blah. It's okay. But 13 years out of high school, and I don't really have the same mentality that I did before when I wrote that song. I wasn't so carefree and unstructured. I'm very goal orientated now. I have a lot more years on, in case the hairline again hasn't fucking made that clear. So like I find that song gets a little bit harder and harder to perform as the years go by. Do I still perform it? Yes, it's an exercise for both myself and it's also a grounding experience because I like to share to people. This was the first song I ever wrote. I'm not expecting it to be rounding applause, but again, I use it to showcase that there was always a little bit of potential with my creativity, and it's something to be proud of. You know, it's like when you do good in a sport and you bring home a trophy. Like, you take a little bit of pride in those things. As I continue getting older, there's not really any songs that I don't feel are inappropriate for me to play because I don't relate to them anymore. I can't bring a sincerity to that song anymore. And a consideration that a lot of musicians need to have from another conversation I was having with my instructor is 2023. Some things are just not appropriate anymore. Okay. The songs that we listened to growing up may not hold light today under scrutiny. So we as musicians need to be very in tune with the populace. You know, we can't take back things that we say, especially with the advent of the internet. You know, if you record a song that says something, you know, that was derogatory towards a certain group 10, 15 years ago, that song is going to be really hard to perform in front of people, you know. Maybe you have the right crowd for it. Maybe you're a not too good person and you kind of just bank on that appeal. Okay, you know, it is what it is and you do what you want with your music, but it is something that we also need to be aware of as musicians while we continue our work. There are going to be times where some of our work is not going to hold up anymore. And I find that to be increasingly more common the further along we get and the more progressive we get, which in itself I think is a good thing. Not getting into politics or anything like that, but being open and a little bit more inclusive, I definitely think that's the right thing to do. And I feel our music should grow with that. And that's where I'll kind of leave all that. So now we kind of get to, tying everything all together, right? So, what I plan on doing, since I know my music career prime has been gone for a long time, or has been dead for a long time, I kind of just want to record literally everything I have. And I kind of want to do almost a literal epitaph album. Like, it's going to be everything that I've ever wanted to say in one form. It's going to be everything. And it's not going to be like a 4 CD, like, release type thing. Like, I'm kind of past that. It's more of just, I want everything out there, everyone has access to it, and then be done with it. Will I continue writing from there? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I did not anticipate to write as many songs as I did for this album, and now it looks like I may have to release an album before this album because I've been really inspired the last year to write a lot more than I did um, since I was in my heyday of performing in 2012, basically. So, with that being said, I stopped performing in 2020, or sorry, in 2021 because of a story that I've already shared before with you guys about how my uncle, who passed away during the pandemic, we ended up having a year anniversary of his death date tribute concert, and I learned that virtually no one cares about you. The show was all bad. You guys can see it in another video. I'll try and link it on here if you want to find that specific portion and learn the whole story. Excuse me. But basically, I realized at that point that no matter how good of a musician you are, no matter what kind of stories you tell, at the end of the day, no one cares because you're still basically just entertainment. And I realized I don't want to share anything with anyone anymore, which is ironic because what am I doing now? I'm holding a phone and I'm sharing a whole bunch of advice and some tips and some personal views on music, but I'm not necessarily performing my music. Now, the logical conclusion would be like, okay, well, you're done for performing, but for how long, right? Every time I've told that to musicians, every musician's be like, yeah, you'll be back. It's like, okay, but will I? Because if we're looking at things in the context of what we're talking about in this video about past my prime, how can I give a quality, authentic, and genuine performance with all that in the back of my head? It's not going to turn off. It's not going to go away. And since that time period, I have done some performances. In the sense of I don't use the stage name that I used for the longest time. I completely disassociate myself from it. I just go by my real name now. Um, I have not played full shows. I've not even played a full set. And I've not gone out of my way to play with other people. It's usually just been a situation where I see some people who I know are playing and they say, hey, you want to play something? Cool, come on up. Or something where it's like, I've gone to an open mic and, I just, decide to play a song or two. It's nothing like that. I've only within the last 6 years, I've only performed one original within that time period. One of my originals, and it was literally the one about that I'd written for my uncle for that tribute concert. That's it. Any other song that I performed has been basically for private stuff, like my wedding. Like only 7 people heard me perform my wedding song for my wife. Um, so you know, we'll switch the camera around. So with all that stuff, how do you give a performance then with all that stuff in the back of your head? I think there are musicians who are more than capable of doing it, and I have personally seen some. I've seen some people who've kind of come to terms with where they're at musically, career wise, and it's haunting. It's very sad to see someone continue doing something that you know they're not going to be successful at. And this isn't like a situation where you're being pessimistic. Like, no, there's a lot of realistic things. They have families, they have kids, they have jobs and responsibilities that make them always have this be more of a hobby more than it can be a career. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the reality of the situation. Now, thankfully, we have technology and we have the benefits of doing everything ourselves. So there's always still a better chance than there was 20, 30 years ago. Maybe they just become a YouTuber instead. Maybe they become like a streamer and they're just like, they stream them creating a song or playing a song. Who knows? Doesn't matter. There's something there that can keep them in the game, but not really with the performance side of things. And that's kind of where all this keeps coming back to, like I think a lot of musicians should really understand that just because you're past your prime doesn't mean you need to stop playing. It just means that if the odds are stacked that much more against you, whether it's for the career side of things, your age and how appropriate it is with the genre of music you play, and because of the physical limits of, whether being injured or older or not just being able to be as good of a musician as you used to be, adapt, improvise, overcome. It's a military thing that we do all the time. I know people can do it. But being aware of it is what's going to jumpstart you to start thinking like that, to start doing stuff like that. Now, I don't want to call out any names in any of this stuff, but I do have personal experience with this. And something tells me, especially after the pandemic, and the music industry has really been uprooted with a traditionalist view, and we're starting to finally incorporate some, modern progressivism in it. I think now is the best time for people to really realize that. You've been locked away for 2.5 years. Some musicians have probably been using that time wisely. Some musicians have probably just been aging, not doing anything. And we're supposed to pay thousands of dollars, thanks to fucking Ticketmaster, and see a subpar performance the first year out of a pandemic. Or, well, depending on where you are. At least here in where I'm at in Chicago. This is kind of like the first full summer where we're like actually able to do stuff. So that's kind of why I want to bring people aware of it. Maybe that time, that 2-year break where you weren't performing as much as you could have, or you weren't recording, or you weren't writing new material, or you just simply weren't practicing a few scales to keep yourself up. Maybe this is that time to really look deep, and be like, am I past my prime? And it's only going to be up to you to kind of figure out where to go from there. I've kind of stated my piece on it. I don't want anyone to think that this is like me trying to say to a bunch of musicians who shouldn't be playing anymore to stop. I can't stress that enough. But I also don't want to discourage musicians who may be up and coming in every sense, whether they're younger musicians who are, getting into the world of things, or the musicians on that low to mid tier that I'm kind of specializing all these videos towards. It's just something to always be aware of your entire career, because there's 3 points to it. There's your age, your musicianship, and your career. And a lot of people tend to miss that career, and then the other 2 just kind of sneak up on you, So by being aware of it, I think people can do a little bit more about it. I know I'm kind of just starting to sound like a broken record, so I'm going to wrap this video up. Like I said, I'm going to try and make them shorter. So now instead of 30 minutes, we're at 25 minutes. But yeah, go ahead and leave some personal stories if you feel okay with it. I would rather be a personal story from you directly than calling out someone who may or may not want to be in that position. But I would welcome any commentary that people have on this because it is a dark subject. It makes a lot of people very shy. And, if you're anything like me, it hits you really hard when you kind of realize you're past your prime. And especially when you're someone who's so young and still relatively so musically capable, you know. But there's multiple facets of being past your prime. And there are thankfully multiple ways to get around that when you're aware of them, you know. I definitely still can be a better musician than if I wanted to. I don't do that. I decide to spend that time and effort helping train the next generation of musicians so that they can have what I never had opportunities with. Which I kind of feel is like what all people, when they start going through their dad phase, tend to do. Um, but to keep lying to myself every night and thinking that there's still a chance for my music career, all it did was hold me back. It prevented me from writing the kind of music that I wanted to hear. It prevented me from taking chances with fun opportunities instead of trying to scour for serious business potential things. And it made me burnt out with music. It made me realize I really don't enjoy music anymore. But that wasn't it. It was I don't enjoy making music a business anymore. I just want to enjoy music. So that's another thing that maybe I can curb is just by making you aware of it in the aspect of are you past your prime with your career? Do we still need to treat it like a business? That's on you. We can still always have fun with it because that's what music is at the end of the day. It's the thing that makes us want to keep doing things. That's what all art does. So, finally, shut up now. Please, any stories you guys have on it, let me know. I don't really think there's anything else to add on this, so I don't think there'll be a part two or anything to continue. So this will be a little standalone thing, and who knows? Maybe I'll revisit this in a few years though, and kind of see like, was I right? Like, am I past my prime or not? So, thank you all for watching. You have yourselves a good one.